policing. Propose to create or change agencies or the power of elected officials. New York City's voters will be able to vote on the Commission's proposal as ballot measures in the November 2022 elections. I asked the External Affairs Director, Deputy Director Harold, to step in to share about the patterns of inequity identified in the interim staff report.
Thank you, Commissioner Yu. Harold Miller, Deputy Executive Director for External Affairs, go by the pronouns he, him. And in the first phase of public input, New Yorkers voiced how structural racism has impacted their lives or their communities, as well as the ideas to combat structural racism and make our city more just for everyone. Using this feedback, input from community leaders, current New York City employees, the Commission staff identified 6 patterns of inequity experienced by BIPOC communities, and BIPOC stands for Black, Indigenous, People of Color. These inequities include inequity in quality of services, the inequity in neighborhoods, the inequity in work and wealth building, marginalization and overcriminalization, the inequity in representation, and government accountability rounds out the 6 patterns of inequity. We encourage you to read more about these inequities in our New York City for Racial Justice interim report by the Racial Justice Commission staff. You can find this report on the Racial Justice Commission website, which is nyc.gov/racial justice. And I will turn it over to Commissioner Bermudez.
Great, thank you. I believe we have Commissioner Mata has joined us or will shortly be in here. Oh, there she is. First of all, congratulations on your Staten Island Power 100 naming. I don't know if one is supposed to say that, but I just wanted to congratulate you. Oh, and also, acknowledge Commissioner Davey, who's also joined us. So, Commissioner Yu, do you want to continue to give Commissioner Mata a chance to get in the groove?
Absolutely, and I also send congratulations to Yesenia as well. As a reminder, this input session, including testimony, is being live streamed to the public and will be part of the public record. If you prefer to submit written testimony, please visit the Racial Justice Commission website for instructions. There are resilience and emotional support staff known as REST, available tonight for anyone who needs. Please contact RJC staff in the chat or email racialjustice@charter.nyc.gov to request assistance from the REST team. Each person gets 3 minutes to testify, and you will be notified via chat when your time is up. Names will be called in groups of 4 in the order of registration. You will see a notification to accept panelists, then you will appear with other commissioners on screen. You are welcome to turn your video on or keep it off. We do ask, however, that you remain muted until it is your turn to speak. Once all in the group of 4 finish, we'll keep you on as a panel in case commissioners have questions, any follow-up questions. At the end of the Q&A session, you will switch back to an attendee so you can listen to the remainder of the session. If you did not register to testify and you are interested in doing so, please be sure to indicate that in the Zoom chat and you will be added to the list. We have worked to create group agreements that set boundaries for mutual respect among attendees. Listed here are our group agreements developed at our very first input session in Staten Island. Do we have that coming up?
I think there was going to be we would show it in a PowerPoint.
Okay.
Well, I think that these agreements are well known to many, if not all of us, of respect and one mic and really honoring the humanity of everybody who is speaking without judgment. And so I do believe they're going to come up in a minute. as we're getting ready for then the community testimony. Let's see, and we'll get us going here with the first folks who are going to speak. All right, so our first three speakers will be in this order: Izoria Fields, Ivy Newman, and Hannah Anusha. And number 4 would be Loretta Humphrey. So I believe you're going to be moved into the panelist section. And we will begin with Ms. Fields. Okay, I think we're
trying to come off mute.
okay. Hannah is on. So we will begin with Izoria. Am I pronouncing your name, Ms. Fields? I'm sorry. Is it Izoria or Izoria? Izoria? Oh, you're muted. So
sorry, Izora.
Izora. Okay, Izora.
Yeah. So good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak before you again. My name is Izora Fields, and I'm with the East New York Community Land Trust Initiative. And I just would like to reiterate the testimony that I gave at the last hearing at the Brooklyn Museum. So the East New York Community Land Trust Initiative is a group of residents from East New York and Brownsville who are bonding together to fight for community control of publicly owned vacant land and abandoned properties for the betterment of our community. This means taking these lots and creating affordable, truly affordable home ownership opportunities for ourselves and our communities, as well as creating viable commercial spaces for Black-owned businesses in our community and promoting generational wealth. And we ask that the Racial Justice Commission fight to make changes to the New York City Charter to ensure that lots that end up on the New York City tax lien sale are transferred to the CLT, as well as vacant lots in our neighborhood that are owned by city entities that are currently being transferred to for-profit entities. We ask that CLTs not only be prioritized, but actually be the first point of contact as we are looking to dispose of these lots of lands, and not dispose of them. I don't even like that word. Let's say to put them to better use, because that's what we seek to do, put them to better use for our people. We are an organization that are working to create a difference for ourselves and our neighborhood. And our motto is for us, by us. And we're in this together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's great to see you again. And thank you for your commitment to the ideas that you're presenting. So we will move on now to Ivy Newman.
Yes, hi, I'm Ivy Newman. I'm just a concerned resident of Manhattan, living on, particularly in East Harlem. And one of the issues that I'd like to be addressed is the correlation between what's happening with open use of just drugs, particularly on 125th and Lexington area, the East Harlem area, and how it's impacting that community, which is a Black and brown community. And I'm sure it's happening in other areas around the city, but I can only speak to my residents. And what can the city do in the charter to ensure that I don't like to use the term that the streets are cleaned up, but that people are getting the resources that they need in terms of health, in terms of safety and security, in terms of it's a lot of things. It's a food desert. That whole area of our city has an issue, and I'm just bringing that to the attention of because I think there is a lack of care because the community is a community of color. And I just like to bring that forth to the Racial Justice Commission if there's any way that can be addressed some kind of way structurally in the charter for all areas that are dealing with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Newman. I'm sure other people will have a Q&A, so we will get more into detail with you. So Hannah, did I pronounce your last name correctly? How do you pronounce your Anushe? Great. So your turn.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, commissioners. I'll try to keep it short and not repeat myself too much because, like Izora, I've testified before you at the Brooklyn Museum recently. But I do want to reiterate our demand that you put forward 2 proposals for city charter amendments. The first is to propose a formal ban on selling tax, water, and emergency repair liens to private entities, whether those be individuals or trusts. From its inception, the tax lien sale has negatively and disproportionately harmed BIPOC communities, and we've sent the commission data and maps that make that point so clear. The second is to propose a ballot initiative that would amend the city charter to require the city, when disposing of public land, to prioritize CLTs and to prevent the city from disposing of public land to for-profit developers. I mentioned this NHD report, but I just have to reiterate. In recent years, 80% of city-owned land has been transferred to for-profit developers. And that is truly unacceptable. And we really need to do something about that. And we need the commission's help. And so, I just really want to conclude by urging the Racial Justice Commission to use its power and to really hear our demands and to put forward concrete, detailed proposals that will really impact BIPOC communities' lives in material ways. Because the fear is that unless they're concrete charter amendments, they won't have real impacts on people's lives. I know the Racial Justice Commission is looking to put forward broad sweeping reforms. And I would argue that protecting public resources from privatization, land, public sector jobs by getting rid of the tax lien sale, that's one of the most broad sweeping and important things that this commission could do. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Hannah. Finally, Loretta Humphrey. Ms. Humphrey on. All right. I don't see Ms. Humphrey on the panelist view, so we can maybe start with a question, any questions or comments from the commissioners, and then if Ms. Humphrey gets on, we will turn to her. So any commissioners? Oh, Joanne. Oh, go ahead. Yes. No, jump in and then Henry. Yes, Joanne and then Henry.
I have a question for Ms. Newman. If you can turn your camera on. I'd like to hear a little bit about what is happening in your neighborhood and what are some of the solutions that the community has discussed, and how are you addressing the challenge right now? I'd like to hear what's happening.
Just to be frank, I don't know. I think there's dialogue on community boards. I think there's talk, but There's been no concerted and collaborative effort to address the issue that the public is aware of. So I don't know. I wouldn't even know where to begin to find that information out except for through the community boards, which I said they're discussions, but Riverside Church and Abyssinian Baptist Church, I mean, there's talk, but the talk is just identifying the issue. So.
Thank you.
Commissioner Garrido.
Thank you. I wanted to go back to the testimony regarding the banning the lien sales, because one of the, we've heard this throughout the testimony. One of the concerns that was brought to me, which is if you ban the lien sales and you don't have something to substitute what you're banning, or what the next step is, and the solution would be if it's community land trust or community ownership, where's the gap? Like, how do we handle the gap between what would be potentially some charter amendment and then what happens after the fact? And I wonder if any of the panelists who testified on this could shed some light on what the thinking behind is about the bridge between banning the lien sales and the process for community ownership. There's a lot of properties on the lien sales, right? I don't know that the community may be able to take them all. So is there a process that you're suggesting in between? Thank you.
So Hannah has her hand up. So Hannah, we'll go with you first. And then if Izora wants to follow up, yes, she has her hand up. So we'll go with Hannah first and then Ms. Fields.
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner, for that question. So, I mean, we as a coalition, so we're members of the Abolish the Tax Lien Sale Coalition. And so we've spent, the last, 2 years, actually developing a replacement system for the tax lien sale. There's many different options, to be honest with you. And, many of them are fairly simple. Like what we have put forward is a fairly simple solution where, the city can actually collect the debt itself. That's how it's handled in pretty much every city across the US. It would restore a lot of public sector jobs, in the Department of Finance. And it's a system that the city already knows how to do. The city has collected debt in the past. It can do it, and it's nothing new. And we wouldn't be expecting community land trusts to be able to take on all the properties at once. That's why the solution that we're proposing actually calls for like an intermediary, whether that be the city or another entity like a land bank, like Neighborhood Restore, that would take on the properties first, because we do recognize that that it doesn't make sense for CLTs to take on all these properties at once. That being said, there is a whole ecosystem of nonprofit affordable housing developers as well as CLTs. And we actually really look forward to working with the city council, looking forward to working with the new mayoral administration on this replacement system. But the issue is that the city agencies do not have an incentive to work with us on a new system while the lien sale exists. And that's really why we need the Racial Justice Commission to step in, because while the lien sale exists, there is not the will to work with community on a replacement system.
Thank you. Ms. Fields?
Thank you. So I agree with everything that Hannah said, right? We even have a member of our organization who is a part of the tax lien task force that has been put together to help also with coming up with solutions for how we can move forward with collection of taxes and also preserving the land for the people in the long term, right? Instead of just handing it over to a group of investors that have a trust at Mellon Bank of New York. I think that, that's the biggest part right there, is that the system is closed as it stands, and the reason why I originally found out that the tax lien sale is the way it is, because I was actually looking to invest in tax liens. In many other counties across the country, you can invest in tax liens, you can purchase tax delinquent properties, maybe they've been abandoned, or maybe it's just a vacant lot of land, right? And you can acquire it, fix it up, make it better for the community. However, these 5 counties that make up New York City, they all of the tax liens in these 5 counties are sold to a single trust at Mellon Bank of New York, making the system closed. So your common person cannot get involved in the process and ensure that the city collects the taxes that it's looking to collect, and the properties actually go to a better use, right? They're fixed up, they're made into housing, they're made into commercial developments, things that are useful for the community. Now, with entities like Community Land Trust across the city, what we're able to do is connect with the people, right? And not only bring those properties back up into good standing with their taxes, but make sure that they never go into the tax lien sale ever again. And then also there's the question of preventative measures, right? So what do we do about properties that are tax delinquent, but not quite delinquent enough to get on the tax lien sale? We want to make sure that they don't make it there, right? We want to make sure that they stay up to date on paying their taxes and things like that. We want to make sure they're educated about every responsibility that they have as a property owner, so that they can maintain the property for the long term. And this is a long-term solution. We're not just thinking of keeping it for themselves, but also for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank
If
you.
I may, if
Yeah,
I
go
may,
ahead.
I guess this is what I wouldn't say it would make at least me uncomfortable to say that if we were to put a proposal that will go to the ballots, right, which is what this is, where you simply outlaw lien sales without what comes out next. I think it's an application of it could be something that we would have to work a little further. And I say that because, say the commissioner see merits in this, we take to a vote and puts it. The day this thing puts in the ballot and the voters vote on it, it would be legal to do so. The next day there would have to be a program to take its stead, because these have financial implications. So I would be curious if you have those ideas, I would suggest that if you can forward them to the commission, I would find that helpful. Thank you.
Yes, we definitely will. And just to say, so the financial implications, the city takes in $70 million on average per year from the tax lien sale. So that really is a drop in the bucket in terms of the whole city budget and how much revenue from property taxes the city gets.
Thank you. And
if you insource it, you would have to hire staff. Like there's an offset of it, right? So if you're doing, I'm calling it insourcing. But if you put it on the Department of Finance, I represent the people in finance, which, it's obvious this is something that we'd be looking at. But then what happens, right? What's the end result of doing it? I would be very interested to, hear what that would look like. Thank you.
I'll send it to you right away.
I just want to acknowledge that Loretta Humphrey just joined this group, and I want to give her the chance to speak. So, Ms. Humphrey. You're on mute in case you're trying to speak. All right, maybe there's technical difficulties. Any other commission members want to follow up?
Yeah, I have a question for the two speakers and advocating for the land trust. The question I have is like, what happened if like, homeowners who cannot afford to pay delinquent tax? It's not a question, just a collection, right? Sometimes, yes, people do miss paying the tax, but what happened? What would you do if like, families or individuals that cannot afford to pay, then do you collect taxes, try to collect taxes from them, or do you how would you make sure that that happens, or like how do you help them to pay for the tax? Do you pay for them or what? I mean,
Yeah, great question. So, we are aligned with the city in the fact that we know that the city really needs property tax revenue, that it pays for a lot of important things in the city, no doubt about that. But another really important thing is keeping people in their homes at all costs. And so the replacement system that we've developed creates a number of different pathways for property owners who are struggling. Like an initial phase is getting in a payment plan, possibly getting, some small grants, because often it's a very small amount of debt that people have that puts them on the tax lien sale list. So it's trying to get them out of that situation early on. Then there could be another pathway where, people are offered the option to have their debt forgiven. And they would go in their land, not their property, would go in a community land trust. If they, don't want that option, then the city can offer them, another option to go in a payment plan and then possibly initiate the foreclosure process, which is what we don't want, that's later on in the process. Then, the property after foreclosure is initiated, the property could then go in a community land trust and the property owner could be given the option to go back in their home. So like the whole system is designed to just keep people in their homes while creating ways for them to get off of the tax lien sale. I hope that answers your question. I'll send you this. We have a diagram.
Thank you. I really would love to figure out how Loretta Humphrey can join us. We will keep trying, but if there's no more questions of this set of presenters, I will move on to the next group of 4. One last chance for commission members. Okay. Next, we have Kiara Reyes, Athena Bernkov, Deborah Ack, and Akila Brown. So bear with us for a minute while we get everybody in the right places. Okay, Kiara Reyes is indicating that testimony is a translated one. So can you tell us who your partner is so that we'll put that in, we'll have the right order? Oh, so Genesis, so we will also need Genesis Vasquez to be put in the list. Okay. So everybody's in. So Genesis, do you want to begin then? And then we'll move to Kiara. You're muted. Sorry.
Oh, so sorry.
No worries.
Good evening. My name is Genesis, and I'm a researcher with the Intergenerational Change Initiative, or ICI, a youth participatory action research group housed at the CUNY SPS Youth Studies Program. ICI works with city agencies, youth advocates, and activist organizations to use this research for our shared goals of uplifting youth voices. We embed our research work in the experience of youth gathered directly from and in their own words. We strive to be a way through which youth may have an authentic voice in the running of their city. Young people's potentials are being diminished by inadequate and inequitable access to essential services and resources, such as quality education, job opportunities, and healthcare. With these experiences felt uneven from neighborhood to neighborhood, much of what was discussed in the report was supported by our quantitative and qualitative research. For example, a key inequity of grave concern to young people and also identified by the Racial Justice Commission is the overcriminalization of BIPOC and LGBTQ plus New Yorkers. We believe that these unjust experiences will not be as pervasive as spaces where decisions are made are inclusive and democratic, and if the accountability and enforcement of policies were taken seriously. Our data reports that youth believe strongly in limiting the power of police by creating separate organizations to handle emergencies such as mental health crisis and domestic violence. These are many areas in which our research is useful to the RJC, but we encourage you to think about deeply. For starters, we have the ways that youth are represented in each of the 6 inequities the RJC was highlighted in its report. Second, the need for youth to be intentionally considered in structural changes made in New York City. And lastly, filling the gap in youth data, such as from our Youth Ask Youth Census survey and how young people felt about issues of equity around New York City. New York City is responsible for the inclusive representation of youth in the structure of our city government. We propose reimagining the role youth play in our city to forefront action led by youth to represent youth. We will partner with youth from New York City and civic youth organizations like Citizens Committee for Children and YVO to gather even more youth input on how our democratic structures should include young people. We will continue gathering data that is youth-specific, generate solutions through participatory methods, and invite the RJC to partner with us so that the whole city can utilize and benefit from our unique research. Historically, youth have stood at the front lines of movements for social justice around the world. In fact, our testimony right now is proof that youth are politically engaged and down to the work. The Intergenerational Change Initiative hopes that the RJC will recognize the value in our work and collaborate with New York City youth to develop a long-term structural that equity includes youth voice in the running of New York City.
Thank you, Genesis. We'll turn it now to Kiara. I thought Kiara before.
We were just gonna have we're only gonna have the English version, not the translation.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. So Athena Bernkov.
Good evening, commissioners. Good evening, community members. My name is Athena Bernkov. I'm the project director of East Harlem El Barrio Community Land Trust. My pronouns are they and them. The East Harlem El Barrio Community Land Trust works to develop and preserve community-controlled, truly and permanently affordable housing, commercial, green, and cultural spaces in East Harlem El Barrio and Central Harlem that prioritizes households of extremely low to low incomes. East Harlem El Barrio CLT was founded in large part due to the incredible work and dedication of Picture the Homeless, which is an organization that was created and is led by people who have or continue to experience homelessness. Recently, East Harlem Barrio CLT was able to acquire our first set of properties that were formerly city-owned, which has allowed us to preserve the affordability of the rents of the residents who currently live in those buildings. And we're also continue to organize around increasing the affordability of other units across the 4 buildings in our project, as we continue to build out the collective governance structure that is tenant-led of the Mutual Housing Association that will own all the buildings on the land that is on our CLT. And so with that, we come to CLT work in the belief that community control is one of the most crucial ways in which we create opportunities to solve some of our biggest challenges in both around land use and housing in the city. And we find that that's actually the case for most of the CLTs that are organizing around the city. And there's been incredible increase in CLTs across the city. And that's because I think a lot of the folks who are doing this organizing come to it having experienced or directly or witnessed the violence of either eviction, housing insecurity, community planning that has put environmentally damaging infrastructure in their communities, leading to poor health. All of this predominantly affecting Black and Brown New Yorkers from all different types of experiences, but predominantly working class. And so I'm here to advocate very strongly and push forward that the city, that the commission puts forward the suggestion to amend the city charter to prioritize CLTs when transferring city-owned land out of the city ownership, as well as banning the transfer or so-called disposition of city-owned land to private owners who more often than not have a profit motive and ignore the impact of some of their policies on the Black and Brown working class communities that are oftentimes the target of these policies and these land and property transfers. And the intention here is that I actually really appreciated the testimony from the community member from East Harlem earlier, asking what can be done around these challenges, the community challenges around substance use in communities, especially those where we find that Black and Brown communities are disproportionately experiencing challenges with substance use or substance abuse. And CLTs have an incredible versatile use in that they are can be used as a formation for communities to organize around land and housing in so many ways, and really create the infrastructure for community members to be in decision-making around what their community should look like, what their housing should look like, and how land should be used. And so just really would like to ask the commission to hold the city accountable to pushing forward the solutions that community members have identified for ourselves as what we need to address the incredible violence of the scale of homelessness in our city, the scale of land security, and all of the above. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Deborah Ack.
Good evening, commissioners, and once again, thank you for the opportunity to give my testimony again to you. My name is Deborah Ack, and I am a longtime resident of East New York for approximately 15 years. In addition, I am a member of the East New York CLT, and I am the person that Ms. Izora Fields spoke about, who has been elected to be on the task force that the mayor put together to create change in the way that the city collects its taxes, which hasn't been an easy task for me due to the fact that I am the only community member on there when I'm fighting against the administration, the Department of Finance, and all the other entities involved in that task force. We, the East New York residents, are a volunteer-run organization based in East New York and Brownsville. We believe East New York is not for sale. We envision a community where our people come before profit, where the residents have a say in what is built and who owns it. Planning and development in East New York and Brownsville should be led for us, by us, the longtime Black and Brown residents. Racial equity in land use and housing starts with BIPOC communities having control over land and housing in our neighborhoods. The displacement and exploitation has to stop. We have an opportunity to chart a better path forward. Community land trusts enable communities to determine how the land is used, lead the process, and ensure that the most pressing community needs, truly affordable housing access to affordable, nutritious food, affordable space for community businesses and recreational facilities, and more are met for the long term. CLTs are organizing in Black and Brown communities across the 5 boroughs, from East New York to Northwest Bronx, to stabilize housing, meet community needs, and combat speculation and displacement. Now it's time for the city to direct vacant and underutilized city-owned properties to CLTs and other mission-driven nonprofit developers that not only provide for permanent affordability, but for meaningful ownership controlled by BIPOC community members themselves. We call on the Racial Justice Commission to propose a ballot initiative that would amend the charter to require the city, when disposing of land, of public land, to prioritize CLTs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is Akila Brown.
Hi, everyone. Hi, commissioners. My name is Akila Brown. I currently live in the South Bronx, but I was born and raised in Brooklyn. Tonight, I'm testifying alongside members of the New York City Community Land Initiative, also known as NICELY. I don't have the background, however. I'm joining NICELY in calling on the commission to propose a revision to New York City's charter that will prioritize CLTs and other community-based nonprofits when disposing of public land. While this proposal has important and broad implications for achieving racial equity through land justice, I want to testify a little bit through a slightly more personal lens. I was a teenager living in Bed-Stuy and unfortunately eventually pushed out of Bed-Stuy. I went to high school at Brooklyn Tech in Fort Greene when I started hearing about the changes that were coming to Atlantic Yards, a place that I had associated with the Clock Tower building that used to house the bank where my mom opened up my first bank account. It was a place where I knew that I could always take a train anywhere I needed to go around the city if I ever got lost, for example. And it was close to the downtown stores on Fulton Mall, where I'd be able to stretch my small summer youth checks to buy clothes, sneakers, and CDs. And really that area reflected a dynamic cross-section of Black and Brown people who brought culture and strength in spite of dealing with the long history of disenfranchisement and disinvestment. But I heard that an arena was coming to Brooklyn at that location. I remember hearing my neighbors, friends, and family talk about the fact that people were being kicked out of their homes to make this project possible. But I also heard rumblings about potentially more affordable housing, potentially more jobs for youth like me in the area. It was painted as an opportunity. After all, Jay-Z was bringing the Nets to Brooklyn, and he would make sure that we were good, supposedly. But none of that ever manifested in the way that my community had talked about it. In fact, things became worse. It wasn't just the arena that would create this insulated economic growth and profit. That entire area became inaccessible. Not only did those Fulton Mall stores that I used to frequent get replaced by luxury stores that we couldn't afford, but downtown's Black culture became less and less obvious. Black-owned stores further up Fulton Street, like Hickman, Raven, Nubian Heritage, were priced out, and Black and Brown families who lived in the neighborhood and surrounding areas were displaced. Now, I'm sure I'm not saying anything surprising, especially to this audience, but memories tend to be short. And while we may look at downtown Brooklyn, Fort Greene, Clinton Hills, and neighborhoods alike as too far gone, it's important that we remember the conditions that made that possible. Atlantic Yards was publicly owned. It was a public asset that could have been used to achieve maximum public benefit, substantially more affordable housing, a great deal of free and affordable recreational and art space for Brooklyn youth, a place for street vendors, and more. But instead, that benefit was funneled up to only a select few, and it came with significant tax breaks, public subsidy, and low-cost land. But at whose expense? Now, I realize that the Atlantic Yards was state-owned, and the state, working with the city and for-profit developers, got it wrong. But the city actually has a chance to get it right for city-owned land and for good. That can happen through the charter commissioners. The charter, as currently written, allows the city to become strange bedfellows with for-profit developers when it comes to city-owned land. In fact, Section 384 of the charter authorizes the sale of public land for the highest marketable price, which results in a paradigm where the city actually incentivizes for-profit development by exploitative companies like for a city rather that focus very little on public benefit. It's time for the speculation and displacement in low-income Black and Brown communities to stop. New York City owns thousands of vacant and underused lots. These lots should be prioritized for CLTs and other community-based nonprofits that commit to keeping land and housing permanently affordable and commit to giving tenants and community members meaningful control and decision-making power over development. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Your passion is palpable, and we appreciate your, and all of you who've come a second time, thank you as well. So I will open it to questions from commission members. I just want to flag, we have a lot of people who are going to speak tonight. So we want to make sure that we get everybody in, and this is very exciting. So commissioners, any questions? Yes, Commissioner Thompson.
Well, thank you. And I worked on Atlantic terminals in 1984 as a college graduate student just starting off. And Ms. Brown is absolutely right. There were a lot of promises made to the community back then, few of which were kept. I just wanted to ask Ms. Brown if she could repeat the section of the charter so that I can do my homework on that point.
Sure, Commissioner. It's section 384 of the charter that actually dictates how real property of the city is disposed, transferred, sold, leased.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, thank you all very much. We really appreciate your input. And we'll now turn to the next group of speakers who are Elviria Mamon, Brenda Davis, David Paul Gerber, Cristina Castro. Okay, let's see. So there's a few technical difficulties at the moment. Elviria's computer is not working so much. Christina is not going to contribute tonight. Okay, so then let's start with, do we have Brenda Davis or David? So we have David Paul Gerber on tap. So why don't we start with David?
Yes, hi, good evening, everyone. My name is David Paul Gerber. How are you doing today? I thank you very much for this commission to help change the charter here. There are two issues at hand here. One is about the Atlantic Yards, which about the housing itself. There was housing in the back, but like I said, the development here was it changed the landscape, and there's some negative aspects about it, but there's housing. I just want to point that out first. But my biggest concern is about government accountability, specifically the New York City Police Department, which needs to be held accountable for everything they do. And when I say everything, it affects every person of color, everyone in the neighborhoods too. When you go into Google Maps, you don't even have to go to a precinct. When you go to Google Maps, go into areas like the 44th precinct off of Jerome and 169, the 40th precinct, the 52nd precinct over by Webster Mashore Parkway, the 84th precinct on Gold Street in Brooklyn, the 108th precinct in Queens, and other precincts that I mentioned. And you see cars that are taking up space on sidewalks, forcing everyone to walk on the street here. That's number one. Number two, this is a city where everybody should have equal access to wherever they go, be it public transportation or use of a car. The city is not for the privileged, those who feel that they can buy a placard from a law enforcement association and claim they're police surgeon and park it anywhere. It diminishes the quality of life here. And what makes it worse is that the NYPD has very little accountability in resolving and taking action against these issues here at hand. If I was going back to the 70th precinct, which is right next door to the Adapt Community Center, which is a former UCP. It's a community where there's a lot of disabled people that live next to the precinct. You will see cars parked on the sidewalk. So the people in the disabled community, especially, and be it anyone, black or white, anyone, would be forced to transport the wheelchair on the street and mix it up. It is really, there's too much favoritism involved here. This should be, the charter itself should be that the NYPD should be held accountable. There's zero accountability. When you report this to 311, many times NYPD would dismiss it as they either took action, what they didn't even show up, or they find there's no evidence of the violation here. There's too much at stake here. The city is getting more and more congested. The air quality is getting very bad, especially in black communities itself.
Okay, David, I'm sorry, David Paul, I'm sorry. Because we have so many people, we're trying to limit everybody's time at 3 minutes. Okay, great.
I'm gonna sum it up.
Okay.
Put it this way, we need to change the culture of the NYPD to hold them accountable to that point. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Brenda Davis. You're on mute, just so you know. I don't know if there's. Okay. All right. Sorry, let me trying to figure out all the all right. I see in my chat to call up Fitz Arthur Brown. and Eva Chan. And Brenda will try to figure out how to bring you in. Okay, we have Eva on board, so let's turn to Eva at the moment. Go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner. I also submitted a written testimony, and just giving a summary here. Social justice means fairly distributing social burden as well as social good. So no one district is overburdened with the less desirable elements of maintaining the health of our society, such as garbage truck, waste treatment plants, homeless shelter, drug treatment facilities. And for many reasons, it is difficult for simply a local elected official to push back on these placement in a few districts. And over the decades, New York City find itself having some of the less desirable social services being disproportionately placed in just a few neighborhoods. And so what I'm petitioning is for the City Commission to put some additional guardrail to help these individual districts to avoid having overburden with these social services, rather than simply relying on elected official to push back on these services. So just case in point, East Harlem has 1.5% of New York City's population, but it has 14% of New York City's drug treatment capacity and 10% of New York City's adult-only homeless shelters. It also has the highest concentration of NYCHA housing in all of New York City's district. It also has a lot of city-owned land and the city disposed of land. It brings in more supportive housing. And as you all know, only 50% of housing is reserved for local residents. So it brings in more residents with special needs into the district. And especially in the pandemic, we can see that this over-concentration of people with special needs create sort of a vicious cycle where the government now needs to add even more social services into the district. And so I'm just petitioning for this additional layer of control. So any placement of social services really should be socialized with a elected official and community board. More data needs to be provided instead of just a simple presentation to talk about how great the social service is, because oftentimes it's really not clear that the district has local needs. We know that New York City has needs for social services, but what needs are there really in a specific district? It's oftentimes not transparent. I'm almost done. As well, there should be more zoning reform. So for example, right now there's pretty strict regulation on where liquor stores and nightclubs can be placed. However, adult-only homeless shelters and drug treatment clinics really doesn't have a similar kind of zoning restriction. So in Harlem, we often find them being placed right next to schools, kindergarten, elementary schools, and we see drug use in front of schools, needles strewed in front of schools. On top of that, in relation to that, what I'm hoping the city would do is to mandate regular, say every 10-year, every 5-year holistic, transparent review of district needs, of what type of social services are needed. Because oftentimes these social services are added individually, one at a time, and there isn't really a commission to look at holistically what exactly it's needed. One final point, because certain districts such as East Harlem has over the many decades continued to receive disproportionate amount of social services, the city really needs to investigate ways to reverse this type of systemic structural racism instead of just saying, we're not going to place more services in East Harlem, because our children are impacted by this on a daily basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Commission members, commissioners, do you have any questions for Eva or David Paul? No. Okay. Thank you both for your testimony today and bringing up those important issues to our attention. The next group of speakers will be Roxanne Delgado, Derek Mikkel, Edward Garcia, and Elise Golden. Oh, Roxanne is asking how to unmute. But I think you just did. Yes. Okay. I'm glad you did. Okay. So Roxanne, you can start.
Thank you, commissioners. I'd like to reinstate what I said at the Bronx public meeting regarding Community Board 11 and how we must change how Community Board works or either eliminate them so they can actually help empower people of color communities as opposed to harming them. I made some examples where they were actually targeting Black and Brown owned businesses regarding renewing or application for application for state liquor licenses. I made examples regarding how they co-named streets even after a community board member who passed away but was quite bigoted in some of the public meetings held in the community board. And I also made examples how they relocated a homeless shelter in Community Board 11 based on that it was too close to schools and homeowners. However, they relocated to an area where it's much closer to schools and homeowners, but the demographic was more people of color. And I really would like this commission to really take this seriously, because as long as this community board continues to be allowed to behave this way with no accountability from the borough president's office, we are actually harming community colors now, and we can continue unless any action is taken. And I made some suggestions. First, I know some people may think it's a little drastic, eliminate community boards totally. Second, make the district manager an electable position where therefore all the, residents, regardless of what color they are or race, have a say in the community board decisions. Mandate city council, city agencies to hold public hearings in the area that's impacted by any proposed projects or decisions, not hold it in the community board, or many members of the community board don't reside or have any interaction in that community that would be impacted. And then also I would like to say, sorry, because I'm picking, that we have to have some kind of mechanism to hold the district manager and board members accountable and remove them from the board when they behave this manner, because right now there's no accountability. And I reached out to the board president's office and there's still no accountability. This has been going on for years. And I know the commissioner said that there was a demographics has been in the city charter, they changed it where community board members are term limit in 8 years. And they must be more reflective of the demographics of the community board. But mind you, many of those board members now have been grandfathered. So those things won't take place till 8 years from the city charter ballot proposal vote. And also many people have been self-identifying themselves now as people of color so they can stay on the board. So we need to have this really addressed to help community of colors. And I'm doing this because I feel like a lot of advocacy we try to do in our community gets, there's a wall between us and the community board 11. When we want something, we can't get it. Actually, community board actually retaliates against us when we push on issues that they don't want, but we want. And this is an ongoing issue. And I really hope this commission really takes this seriously and does something to help us. Thank you.
Thank you, Roxanne. Derek, is Derek Mikkel on? I do see, I thought Edward Garcia will be next.
Sorry if I merge into my virtual background, but hopefully you get the message.
You look very cool, don't worry.
My name is Edward. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for listening to me again. My name is Edward Garcia, and I'm an organizer with Northwest Bronx Community and Closure Coalition, and I'm a proud Bronx resident. We are also a member of the New York City Community Land Initiative, and I'm joining a lot of my colleagues here today, and I'm just gonna go straight into what we have been asking and begging of you all to propose as a charter amendment. And it's that we want all public land to be directed to groups like community land trusts that would ensure permanent affordability and community control. We have started a public land campaign in our neighborhood in which we've noticed that many of our land has sat vacant for a really long time. And recently we started to engage the city and learned that many of them actually have been committed to developers that maybe have a small percentage of ownership, and in their ownership entity is a not-for-profit or it's a person of color. And that's kind of how the city continues to celebrate that they're building truly affordable housing. But when we know in reality, it's not for the people that live in our communities. And so we know that those processes have not really been super transparent and not accessible, and also understand that most developers that have gotten into the hands of public land have not really actually care in truly engaging community in the process of determining what actually fits best. So not to take too much of the time, again, we really encourage you all to take a stand and stand with community and to suggest public land for public good through community land trusts. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Edward. Edward, Elise Golden.
Hi, good evening. So my name is Elise. I'm an organizer with New Economy Project and with the New York City Land Initiative. The New Economy Project works to build an economy that works for all, rooted in racial and social justice, cooperation, neighborhood equity, environmental sustainability. We're supporting people suffering under a racist, predatory financial system through our hotline, building towards a new economy with our work promoting a New York City public bank and promoting community land trusts. So in the report that the Racial Justice Commission put out, it asks, how can we create or strengthen existing enforcement measures in the charter to ensure permanent accountability of those in power? So in terms of land use, the city has some mechanisms for soliciting community input, but there's very few ways to actually hold the city accountable for carrying through that input, and very few ways to hold the city accountable or to hold developers accountable when they break their promises of bringing in affordable amenities to communities. So, and then like Akila said, the charter actually promotes the sale of public land to the highest bidder, actually incentivizing for public development that exploits the communities. So I used to work as a community organizer in Crown Heights, working with tenants who are facing the most severe displacement pressures, buyouts, harassment. Entire buildings were being vacated while developers were then way overcharging new residents illegally, taking thousands of units out of rent stabilization, often again illegally. And so a few years ago, the city decided to dispose of the Bedford Armory in Crown Heights, a huge armory that was completely vacant. And the community, including the Crown Heights Tenants Union and other community groups, were pushing for 100% affordability, knowing that their community was being completely displaced, where, you know, people were living in the shelters, were being forced out of Crown Heights and often out of New York City completely. And instead of listening to this demand, the city disposed of the Bedford Armory by giving it essentially giving it away to BFC partners who made many, nice little community benefit agreements saying, we're going to give some affordable housing, we'll create this rec center. And now that the project is developed, there's over 160 market rate residential units and a rec center that is now proven to be completely unaffordable. So I'll stop, but if you want to, create mechanisms of accountability, disposing of public land to CLTs and nonprofits for community benefit is a great way to start. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much, Elise. Derek is not on, right? So, okay. Commissioners, any questions for any of the presenters? I have a question for Eva, but I want to defer to anybody else who's wanting to ask a question. Eva, do you have a recommendation for how to structure a potential recommendation along the lines that you're talking about in terms of sort of equitable allocation of, services or, in various communities around the city? Is it a proportion? Is it like how would you structure that?
I mean, one of my proposal is there needs to be a more holistic review of public needs, and we need to better trace where people come from. Whether they originally are from Harlem or, East New York, Crown Heights, some of the, people who spoke today. And I think sometimes we simply lack that data. And the holistic review needs to be citywide, looking at, where are the homeless shelter placed, where are drug treatment placed, drug treatment centers or garbage trucks, all these services.
Thank you. Anyone
and
else?
I think also right now we are already in a situation of structural inequality, and the city also need to talk about how to reverse it as well.
Great, thank you. Any other commissioners? Okay. All right, we thank you very much for your time. And again, several of you came to us before, and we really appreciate it. We're taking your input into consideration, and so we greatly appreciate it. The next group of speakers will be Jonathan Lamb, Lena Green, and Nancy Pascal. Okay, is Jonathan on? Yes, Jonathan.
Okay, good afternoon, Commission. My name is Jonathan Lamb, and I'm currently a junior from Benjamin and Cardoza High School and an organizer with the New York Civil Liberties Union Teen Activist Project. Today, I'll be talking about the roles of police officers in our public schools. Before attending Benjamin and Cardoza High School, I was so scared due to all the news of a stabbing and other violent events that occurred on campus. Once I started freshman year, I remember witnessing fights and other events like a shooting threat that occurred. I remember watching police officers bringing in metal detectors, and I felt like a prisoner. During fights, I saw police officers violently rush into the scene. Ever since witnessing these events, I started opening my eyes to the fact that Cardoza High School has overpoliced their own students. While I care about my safety and protection, my classmates and I shouldn't be treated as criminals. Cardozo High School student population is predominantly students of color. I feel as if our school is constantly targeted because of our racial demographic and this idea that we as students of color need to be over-policed. We are only teenagers. We want to learn, study, and be in the same environment as everyone else. Why are we always being targeted by the NYPD in the media? Last month, news articles and a report was released by the NYPD was going to investigate into the fights that were occurring at Cardozo High School since returning into in-person learning. We just went through a year of remote learning. Of course, students are feeling overwhelmed and our mental health is not being prioritized. Yes, Cardozo High School does have an intervention mental health program, but it's barely staffed compared to the nearly 4,000 student population. A school that's predominantly students of color should be invested into rather than ignored and targeted by the NYPD. This is the reality for a lot of public high schools and schools in general in New York City. We should be focusing on increasing funding for mental health resources and programs. We should be providing more counselors in our schools and ensuring that they're well equipped to help our students. We should be implementing more restorative justice practices in our schools instead of locking students in jails. Students of color, mostly African American, Black, and Latinx and Hispanic students have been targeted by the police. It is our responsibility to allow our students to be safe in a comfortable environment in school, and we can achieve this without relying on police officers. We should be aiming towards reimagining what public safety looks like inside and outside the classroom. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. We greatly appreciate what you're bringing to our attention. Our next speaker, hold on, sorry. I lost my place here, sorry. Here we go. Ms. Green?
Yes.
Your turn.
Okay. I am part of the East New York Community Land Trust, and my colleagues already spoke, and we believe that the racial justice community should do what they can in order to amend the chapter and region of the city when disposing of public land of the CLT. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nancy Pascal.
Well, good evening. I want to thank the Commission for hosting this community public input session. I'm really happy and proud to see this happening. My name again is Nancy Pascal, and I'm a former mayoral appointee of the City of New York. And for the past 5 years, I've been working on issue-based outreach citywide. My input stems around knowledge is power. The 2020 census is a perfect example of how entire communities had little or no knowledge of the census, something that's conducted every 10 years in this country since 1790. This process directly ensures that communities get their fair share of billions of dollars in federal funding. Communities that were more affluent had a better understanding of how the census would benefit their communities, did the census. While it was so frustrating to see that the communities most in need had little, no knowledge or understanding. The city and the state spent millions of dollars in educating our communities, but we were starting from scratch. The fact that there was so little understanding of the census is not by accident. This is intentional exclusion, while blaming the community for being apathetic. New Yorkers will engage if we create ways to educate and facilitate dialogue that expresses real concerns rather than yes versus no. Though the city and state spend millions of dollars on outreach, it is important that the New York City education curriculum includes the census. Municipal government overall must do better in its communication with the public. Secondly, Wi-Fi. It's essential, We all need it, especially people with school-age children, but we all need it. Every child deserves, every teenager deserves, every person deserves an opportunity to be able to look for a job. It is critical to our children's education, and New York City should remove any and all barriers for every single person in New York City to be able to access free Wi-Fi and free internet, or extremely affordable. Third, after George Floyd, I watched, I worked, and the people raised their voices and asked for an end to police brutality, and asked that bad police officers be held accountable. I propose that collective bargaining agreements, particularly ones that involve the NYPD's disciplinary actions, be made public. On that note, I want to quote an article from Stephen Rustin, pulled from Duke Law Review. This article empirically demonstrates that police departments' internal disciplinary procedures, often established through collective bargaining process, can serve as barriers to officer accountability. Policymakers have long relied on a handful of external legal mechanisms like the exclusionary rule, civil litigation, and criminal prosecution to incentivize reform in American police departments. In theory, these external legal mechanisms should increase the cost borne by police departments in case of officer misconduct, forcing rational police supervisors to enact rigorous disciplinary procedures. But these external mechanisms have failed to bring about organizational change in local police departments. This article argues that state labor law may partially explain this failure. Most states permit police officers to bargain collectively over their terms of their employment, including the content of their internal disciplinary procedures.
Ms. Pascal, I'm sorry to interrupt. You're over time, yes.
Oh, I just have 3 sentences.
3 sentences? Okay, go for it, really quick. Yes.
Right, it's not that long. This means that police union contracts largely negotiated outside of the public view shape the content of disciplinary procedures used by American police departments. I can stop there.
Thank you. I do appreciate your testimony. So commission members, any questions for our panelists?
Yeah, Madam Chair, today, I just want to have a question to the last speaker, because I think some of the stuff that has been stated on the article are not necessarily untrue, it's just misguided. The concept of qualified immunity, which is a separate concept of collective bargaining, is not embedded in collective bargaining. It's embedded on either state law, in this case, a very specific question, or in the federal law. What happens is that if you are in a collective bargaining agreement, the collective bargaining agreement defers to those laws. So I wanted to ask the panelist if she has seen applications in any city or state where those changes into federal, state, local laws could have been used in lieu of a plan that necessarily throws away collective bargaining agreement, because part of the agreement prohibits, for instance, striking for police officers. So maybe you don't want to, as they said, throw the baby with the bathwater.
Well, here's what I'll say. I'm not an expert on unions, and I believe in strong unions, and I believe in unions that can protect good police officers. What I understand from this article, and this article is broad, is speaking about American police departments across the board. And I believe we do have a strong progressive move here in New York City. But whatever policies that can that is assisting in allowing bad police officers not to be held accountable, that agreement, wherever those policies lie, should be public. That's all. just public so the community can see what they are. If you're saying that that's not the case in New York City, then, you know, I'm not sure that that is what it is.
Yeah, I know. I think that's what I was trying to, without testifying, kind of guide you that the laws in New York City are a little different than they are in the rest of the country. So while the article was correct, a lot of those policies, in, for instance, right to work states and right to work cities, venues, prohibit explicitly that kind of information to be public. But in New York City, the collective bargaining law, because of the Taylor law, is slightly different. I just wanted to, so I think that to your point is that if you want to make something that inherently prohibits or endows a bad police officer or a police officer conducting misconduct, that you want those laws to be changed and reversed, I'm with you.
Right.
What I'm saying to you is the publication of the collective bargaining as it applies from that article to New York City is different here in New York.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Any other commissioners? I have a question for you, Jonathan. And that is, you know, there's a lot that has been written and a lot that has been demonstrated in many places where you can still create safety without having safety officers, right, in a school. Can you talk a little bit about that and whether you believe that to be true, and what are the elements that you think need to be present in a school for students to feel safe without, you know, people watching them, you know?
Right. Thank you so much for that question. I think that, you know, the idea of a law enforcement, especially at my school, it's putting students in a very uncomfortable position. Once again, I go to Cardozo High School, so the majority of us are students of color, mostly Asian American and Black. And a lot of them has expressed their concerns of how they don't feel safe and they feel very uncomfortable. And so the idea of police officers and law enforcement, any type of law enforcement in our schools should be removed. And we should be investing, especially in mental health programs after a pandemic. My school does, and I'm very grateful that we have a mental health program that is very accessible. However, like it's barely staffed compared to nearly the 4,000 students that I mentioned in my testimony. And so I believe that if we start investing more into our mental health programs and implement that in our schools, then that would play a big role and a huge role in reducing the amount of crime and the amount of violent incidents that will occur on our campus. And so also to address the concern over, you know, this idea of law enforcement, we don't need to have this, you know, the role of law enforcement in our schools. We would rather, and I would prefer that we have, you know, us probably like a security guard, because a security guard, they're not attached to a legal system, right? They're not going to criminalize a student who barely learned about algebra, but yet they will be put into jail. And so I believe that we could still have some sort of security guard system without involving the NYPD or any other form of law enforcement. And I believe that we need to increase our funding, especially for mental health programs, and especially with schools like Cardozo High School, where there's so many students that need help. These programs are so essential, and it would be very, I think it would be very beneficial for all of us, especially as the youth.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you all very much for your testimony. The next group of speakers will be Sylvie Cohen, Cleo Mizrahi, Stephanie Wilson, and NB. Okay. All right, as we bring people in, Sylvie, since you're in, why don't you start?
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, I wanted to say that I'm here as a resident of Harlem, Central Harlem, for 25 years and 35, I'm a professional expatriate, but I would like to complement what my neighbor and co-activist Eva Chan very eloquently stated, and complement it because I also worked at the UN. I would like to bring up a little bit of perspective that's more maybe global that could be used for the charter. And some things that struck me. First off, I looked into what de Blasio New York 1 plan said about the concept of livability, and also looked into other instruments of human rights, because we often associate racism with lack of equity in civil rights, but social economic rights. Then the reason why I was looking into that research, even though I did more on human rights and other aspects, is because I got caught up in another city initiative called the Environmental Justice Report. And so my question to the commissioner is, how do you link up that dimension, which is lumped into hoods, but it's wider than that in a way? That's why so often what we, Eva mentioned, is that infrastructure related to mental health or drug abuse is not seen as an environmental risk, but sometimes it is, okay? But it's also what we see is engineered. So what happened? How was it possible for this to happen? And this is what I would offer to dig into, is to look into the zoning. Eva mentioned liquor stores, but further, upstream, we look at the fact that Harlem is not a regular district. It's not core Manhattan. So let's look into the recommendation looking into is to revisit that old 1961 resolution in which Harlem is not a residential district like a core Manhattan. We are like, on the suburb or something, related to parking space, etc. There's no really, a guard against building or infrastructure. Second, I see that health facilities that are encroaching, that are specialized in very special health treatments, are considered also in terms of land use under a different status, okay? That has implication on the way the community can be involved and say yes or no. So here we are also faced by the health academia or the health policymakers who say there is overdose, et cetera, But when you look at how needs are assessed, Eva mentioned, but I went upstream to the way the city planning used data on health, is like totally surrealist, okay? So my suggestion would be to revisit zoning, the zoning resolution in terms of designation of district land use, the role of boards and alerts, but also the fact that boards are useless. Right now, they have no information. They just tell you, okay, tonight, Mount Sinai is speaking. We have no background data. We have no way of, so we need to do a little more in terms of allowing boards to reach out to community and to be also have a decision-making role.
Okay.
But also
sorry to interrupt, but
yes.
you're over the time, and we also have a speaker.
Okay, so I would say that define livability, use indicators that exist, okay? In sustainable development, use budget also, look into zoning and budget data collection that's different, that is really an indicator of livability, of what's going on.
I'm going to need to ask you to
make the use of the Environmental Justice Report. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we have next Cleo Mizrahi. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yes, Mix Mizrahi. Could everyone hear me properly?
Yes.
Hello, everyone. Thank you to the commissioner and thank you to everyone who made this happen. I really want to give a shout out to Nancy Pascal, a great mentor of mine who invited me to this space. I'm working in a child care facility, so it's a little messy behind. I first wanted to give grace that this week is Trans Awareness Week. And as part of Trans Awareness Week, we focus on wellness and liberation for all genders and all expressions. And we're very proud to see the progress that our recent governor, Hochul, was able to add more inclusion to protect trans and gender nonconforming people to not be discriminated against their pronouns and identities, even with business partners. And with that being said, I hope everyone could find a way this Saturday for Trans Day of Remembrance to commemorate the people that are being marginalized and targeted in our city and in our country. I come here today to simply talk about intersectionality in the sense that we live in a city still that claims it's diverse, but it's not inclusive. We have the Asian community and the Hasidic community and other communities living separately, but not in unison. When we see harm that is happening to one community, we don't always see the other coming out in support. I'm someone who's of many identities. I'm a longtime organizer and I'm a longtime artist in New York City. And unfortunately, in a city that calls itself liberal, in a government that claims to be protecting all, I've been attacked as a result of simply living my truth. I've been homeless, I've been neglected by many city agencies that have discriminated against me in a city that's claimed to protect me. So we need to get to a place intersectionally that the culture and the law is respecting of all people that occupy this earth and especially this city. And unfortunately, I don't see that. I need to see a coalition and push amongst our various leaders that if we're asking people to end hate crimes against Asians, we're also asking against hate crimes against trans people. If we're asking against anti-Semitism, we're also asking against xenophobia. And unfortunately, I'm seeing many leaders and many groups asking about their needs and asking about the pains and obstacles in their communities and not focusing on ways to help others. We all live in this city. We all get hurt when we see harm is happening in the city. It is scary that it is over 80% in hate crimes rate, according to the FBI, every year for a liberal city. Take that for a moment. This is really, really upsetting for a city that says that it's for everyone, and the government has been lying to us about that everyone is safe and everyone's included and the crime rates are going down. And I do not need to be the next victim on page 6, God forbid, or anyone else. And I want to see our leaders, our community, our spaces really coming together and really caring about human dignity if we really want racial justice. So I will keep barking for that because we are losing hundreds of trans people of color, for example, across the nation, and I don't see a lot of people caring. I'm not saying that here, but I'm saying in general. The fact that we're complacent of police brutality, of trans violence against people of immigrants, and in our city, and we're overlooking this, we cannot keep going about our lives and thinking only about ourselves. We cannot just say racial justice when it sounds good for academia or for a panel. It needs to be the way we go out into the world and the way we protect our neighbors and the way we truly love who we are authentically. Thank you so much. Again, you could join New York City Queer Activists. I'm not really here for so much comments and push because this committee is doing so many great things and I'm so proud to see where our city is going. But I really need to ask everyone to step out of their comfort zone, out of their communities, out of the people that you associate and extend your allyship to people who don't have. We have the highest rate of homeless people in the country, sex workers, so on and so forth. And this cannot happen in a city that claims to be for all. We need to stop lying to ourselves and we need to start investing for those who need us the most. Thank you so much. You could follow me at New York City Queer Activists.
Thank you very much. Do we have our either NB or I don't see them on here. There was another person, hold on. Or Stephanie Wilson. No. Commissioners, any questions for our last two speakers? Okay. Well, thank you very much for bringing all the matters that you did to our attention. And it's always, good to know that, good to see that there is a overlap of issues that come up, and that we keep hearing themes that are resonating across communities and across activists around the city as well. So thank you, really appreciate it. Are there any other people who would like to speak? We don't have any of the registered speakers right now, so we want to open it up to other participants in case anybody has decided they would like to provide some statements. Can raise your hand in the, at the bottom of your Zoom screen. I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. McCall Johnson. Oh, and you're saying you're registered also. Okay. I think our staff will get you in. You can go right ahead. You're muted though. Sorry. It's one of those, yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those buttons down there. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to present. My name is Michael Johnson. I'm a co-founder of South Bronx Unite and a board member of the Mott Haven Port Morris Community Land Stewards. I'm happy to give my presentations orally. I do not have it written, but I'll make this brief. How much time do I have?
We're trying to get everybody within 3 minutes.
Sounds good. So I just want to say, it's time for there to be a shift. In order for the New York City Charter to ensure permanent accountability with respect to public land disposition, Section 384 must be revised to explicitly prioritize public land disposition to local nonprofits and community land trusts. As community-based nonprofits and commit to permanently affordable land and housing for community control. We've seen how public land has been disposed of in our community, where it's been given to developers as of right or sold dispositions to provide either affordable housing, which isn't affordable for our community, or to developers to develop some sort of economic or job creating venture. We've seen how subsidized entities have received public land, given heavy tax subsidies, but not really providing a public good. We think it's time the charter changes to be more specific to the needs of our communities, that the revision should be put in with an emphasis of the communities that are creating ground up solutions to the needs of our neighborhoods that are specific to each locale, and how this charter all over the city should be should relate to the disposition directly linked to the needs of individual communities. Even though it's a statewide initiative, it's a city charter is being revised, but the way we dispose of property should not just be disposed of only through sole disposition to not-for-profit developers, but to community land trusts and nonprofit organizations that have real vision plans from community engagement and to provide public good. And that's my summation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the commissioners? No, okay. Well, thank you very much. And sorry, I mispronounced your name. We really appreciate your input on this. So I believe, are we, we're checking to see if we're going to have a break or whether this will conclude our evening of input. All right, so we will issue a last call for anyone wishing to provide some testimony. Okay. Doesn't look like anyone. It is anyone, if you after today decide to submit anything in writing, please feel free to go to our website, and you can provide written commentary there. We really appreciate your testimony, all the people that weighed in today, because it's important to the process. And like I said, the consistency of input, it has been really impressive. So it is on public record. We have taken notes, and this will certainly shape our recommendations to come. Let me give you the website in case you want to provide testimony online. It's nyc.gov/racial justice. Also, please follow us on social media. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, we're on all of them, and our webpage as well. We are at Racial Justice NYC on Instagram and Facebook, and at Racial Justice NY on Twitter. Have a good night, everybody, and be well and stay healthy.